So what about progressive overload? This is a term that we hear thrown around a lot in the gym, and it basically means that you are progressively increasing the stress that is in the body. But this does not mean that you need to be lifting more weight every workout or adding more weight to the bar every workout, right? Hey guys, Aaron Kubitz, personal trainer, functional aesthetics EC, helping average guys perform better inside and outside the gym. So today is part number 6 in this 12-part series on common muscle building mistakes. So today we are going to be talking about the principle of always testing, never training. So a little preface to this is differences in psychology between men and women, and since this channel is mostly training advice for guys, we're going to get into that, but we want to look at both of them. So for women are mainly, when they work out, when they exercise, they're doing it mainly because they want to feel better about how they look in their clothes. They don't want to be embarrassed going out in public, so they're trying to get in shape so that they look good that way. Now there can be a lot of similarities between both men and women in this regard. I think men also want to be able to see their toes. They don't want to, look down and see their stomach going over their belt buckle, right? But it's not as big an issue for guys because guys don't tend to derive their value as much from their looks as women do. Instead, guys are usually interested in measures of power, strength, dominance, things like that, right? So they want to get bigger. They want to get stronger. They want to look bigger. They want and especially, another thing is that, especially for guys who have good levels of testosterone, they want to feel like they worked really, really hard, right? And so sometimes the measure of a good workout for a man is feeling like he got totally thrashed at the end of his workout, right? And as I've talked about in other videos, that isn't necessarily a good measure of an effective workout. And so with this mentality though, that, hey, if my goal is to be bigger and stronger, well, if I want to get stronger, then it would mean that I should be lifting as heavy as possible all the time. And so with this in mind, a lot of guys, they're in the gym and they're always testing their 1 rep max all the time. Every time they go in there, they're lifting heavy weights, right? I used to see this all the time with guys in high school, right? They go in there and it would be like, get up to that heavy weight as fast as possible and then just lift the heavy stuff. And forget the accessory exercise, all the other stuff. Just try to lift as heavy as possible every time you're in there. And to an extent, it kind of makes sense. If you want to get stronger, it would make sense that you probably want to be lifting heavier. And that is true to a certain extent. On the other end, bigger muscles indicate more strength, right? And it doesn't necessarily mean that you are going to be stronger than a smaller guy per se, but you definitely have the potential to be stronger because strength training is a skill, meaning that if you possess larger muscles, but you've gotten the larger muscles by training in the methods that I'm going to be talking about later on in this video, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be stronger than a guy who trains purely for strength all the time because you haven't trained your nervous system to efficiently recruit the muscle fibers. In fact, one of the slowest ways to stall out your progress in the gym is to be always training in the 1 to 3 rep range. By the same token, if you're not lifting heavy enough weight, if you're not pushing yourself, but many times people get this confused as to what progressive overload and all these different things mean. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later on in the video, but for now, I want to point out that the strongest men and women in the world and the best athletes are not always lifting at their top potential all year round, right? You have periods where you're pushing, and then you have periods where you're backing off. And the key to optimal performance in your competitions is getting the timing right, whether that is a bodybuilding show and you're trying to cut body fat, a powerlifting show, or a long distance running race. You know, if you're running a 5K, a 10K, or you're running a marathon or something like that, the idea is to build up that training volume, then start working in the intensity in that, shaving it down, peaking so that you are at your absolute best when you need to be in that competition. But the problem is that you're walking on a knife's edge and you can't maintain that year round. So what people see on social media, what people see in powerlifting competitions, the CrossFit games, they see in the Olympics or whatever, is not what these guys are doing year round. Now, granted, their training, intensities are going to be much higher than the average guy, right? Their training loads and their training weights are probably going to be higher too. But that's because they're at this very, very high level. And they got to that very high level not by going in there and lifting at their max every day, or running their maximum mileage, or doing their fastest repeats on the track, or staying at, sub 10% body fat year round. They got there by having times when they peak, and then having times when they go back, but keeping that, always trying to make it so that their low is slightly higher than their previous low, so that their high can be slightly higher than their previous high before. But you're always going to have times where you back off and then you ebb and flow back and forth. And if you think about it, nature is the same way, right? If you had the sun up 24 hours a day, everything would dry out and burn out, right? We'd all be, stressed out of our minds. If it was always cold all the time, you'd have problems that way. It was always hot all the time. So you have these cycles that are evident in nature, and the same thing should go for your training. So if your goal is increasing muscular size, what is more important than the absolute load on the bar is the total amount of weight that you move in your workout. And so what the research has shown is that you can build muscle at very low reps or very high reps and low weight, right? Like even as high as 30 reps per set. So if you're doing for example, you could be doing push-ups, right? If you do a few sets of push-ups for a beginner or something, that could be enough to stimulate muscle growth, right? And by the same token, if you're lifting very heavy weight, but the problem is that the higher the intensity, you tend to, by nature, be not able to lift as much weight in the total volume of the workout, right? Because you're not able to perform as many reps. But if you are able to perform the same amount of total volume, the same amount of total weight in the workout, then lifting heavy weight will be just as effective as lifting in the typical bodybuilding range of 8 to 12 repetitions per set. So let's give an example here. So I had some calculations written out here. Let's say you're doing a bench press and you have 4 sets of 8 repetitions versus 5 sets of 5 repetitions, right? So the 4 sets of 8 is a more typical bodybuilding, but it's kind of the crossover between bodybuilding and powerlifting, right? And a 5x5 is a typical strength training protocol, right? So let's look what the differences are here. So let's say, for example, you can do 4 sets of 8 reps with 165 pounds. Okay, that's going to leave a total of 5,280 pounds. On the other hand, if you are doing the 5x5, it means you're going to have to lift 211 pounds for 5 reps. So 45 pounds more than you were lifting in the previous one to gain, and so the other one, you're only lifting 3 more reps, but the other one, you're having to lift 45 more pounds. And how many people are going to be able to do 211, about 210 pounds, 211 pounds or whatever, for 5 sets of 5 versus 165 for 4 sets of 8? I think there's going to be a much higher percentage of people that are going to be able to maintain that volume with a lower load than the guys doing the 210 pounds. So what about progressive overload? This is a term that we hear thrown around a lot in the gym, and it basically means that you are progressively increasing the stress that is in the body. But this does not mean that you need to be lifting more weight every workout or adding more weight to the bar every workout, right? You can be doing progressive overload with distance running, and there's no weight involved other than your body, right? So you can progressively overload the muscle by increasing the weight on the bar, or you can perform more reps with the same weight, or increase the number of sets you're doing with the same weight, or increase the amount of frequency that you are training that muscle with. So for example, you could be doing bench presses on, like doing push-ups. Let's say you do push-ups on like Monday or something, and then on Wednesday you do a heavy powerlifting style workout, and then on Friday or Saturday or something like that, you would do like another high rep, bodybuilding style workout with lighter weight. And that would be one way of increasing your total work volume or your total, and progressively overloading those muscles with more and more capacity, because we know that volume and time under tension, so the total amount of weight that you're lifting in that workout, and then the time that the muscle is under tension, so not doing these half reps and stuff like that, letting the weight come all the way down, all the way up, right? And the amount of, so for example, the more reps you're doing, that's going to mean that that muscle is going to be under tension for longer periods of time. Also, if you're doing isometrics, right, that muscle is going to be under tension for longer periods of time. So that's another thing. But the key driver is volume. This is not to say that there's not a time and a place to be doing heavy lifting, mechanical overload, because there's a variety of different things that contribute to muscle growth. Things including like metabolic stress, right? So when you're taking shorter rest periods in between sets, right? That can stress out and create more metabolites and stuff, which can trigger muscle growth. The other things would be that mechanical overload from lifting heavier weight. You're breaking down the muscle fibers and stuff, and that can be good for a period of time, but you don't want to be doing that all the time. So instead, what you want to be doing, a good protocol to do, is to stick primarily in that rep range, in the bodybuilding rep range of anywhere between 8 to 15 repetitions, right? And starting out there, as you're going, try to every week be trying to, when you're at the higher end of that rep range, let's say you're in the 10 to 15 rep range, right? Every week, try to be adding more weight to the bar, right? So 5 to 10% for the upper body, 10 to 20% for the lower body, right? And when you get to a point where you cannot maintain your reps with while also increasing the weight, then what you try to do is try to increase the amount of reps you're doing with that same weight. And when you get to a point where you're no longer able to increase the reps that you're doing with that weight, that's when you start to get into the heavier stuff, right? Because you're like, okay, I want to add more weight to this bar. I want to increase the reps. I can't increase my reps anymore. I can't increase my sets anymore. The weight on the bar, I can't perform the same number of reps with it. So obviously, now what you have to do is lift lower rep ranges, right? And so you do that for a while. And when you get to that point where you're getting into that, heavy singles and triples, you do that for a while. And then when your performance starts to kind of plateau, right? And or your joints start feeling a little bit fatigued from all this heavy lifting all the time, that's when you back off and you go back down to your typical bodybuilding rep ranges, but this time, hopefully, you're able to add another 5 to 10% above what your starting weight was before, right? So if we go back to that example of the bench press, let's say you were doing 165 pounds for the 8 reps, 4 sets of 8 reps, and now after going up to this, you know, heavy singles and triples, you come back down and you start resuming the bodybuilding style of training, but now you're lifting with, let's say, 170, 175 pounds for that same 8 repetitions. And so now your total training volume, the amount of weight that you're lifting, is heavier. And so in that way, it's going to help you to grow stronger. So yes, you do need to focus on getting stronger, but you don't need to focus on getting stronger or lifting more weight every single time you're in the gym. It's a cyclical thing, right? So you're increasing those reps, you're increasing the weight, and then you get stalled, and then you start decreasing the reps and keeping the weight high and increasing the weight, and then you get to a point where you kind of stall out there, and then you go back and you repeat the cycle. And hopefully, like I said before earlier in the video, the lows are higher than the previous lows, and the highs will then by default be higher than the previous highs, and the total net effect is that you are going to get bigger and stronger. Alright guys, that's all I have for you today. Hopefully I made my points succinctly and you were able to follow what I was saying. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. If you have any comments you'd like to add to the video, go ahead and do that. If you found the video helpful and valuable and it kind of reframed the way that you think about your training, go ahead and give that the video a like. And if you'd like to see more content related to either workout design like this or programming for athletic performance, losing body fat, working around injuries should you sustain them, and then also training in such a way that you hopefully prevent the vast majority of the injuries that you can happen to you in the gym, then consider subscribing to the channel. Because at the end of the day, going back to the injury thing, is that a lot of times people think, lifting heavy weights and going to the gym, getting stronger and stuff is a inherently dangerous activity, right? Because they see a lot of people get injured doing it. No, strength training is not a dangerous activity. I mean, it's more dangerous to go out and drive your car than it is to lift weights, statistically, right? It's more dangerous to do a manual labor job than it is to lift weights. Why? Because you're in an uncontrolled environment. When you're in the gym, if you're following proper safety precautions, if you're training with intentionality, and you're not just ego lifting, if you're listening to your body, if you have a rhyme and a reason to what you're doing, the odds that you get injured are going to be greatly reduced, and you are, by nature of the fact that you are getting stronger because you have more longevity in the weight room, more longevity in training, means that you're going to be less likely to get injured outside the gym as well. So if you're interested in any of this kind of content that I'm talking about here, go ahead and subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you all in the next video.